After I refused to give my mom my inheritance, she sold my childhood room to pay for my sister's wedding. When I listened and during dinner, I heard her say she was never supposed to succeed anyway. I quietly left. What I did next shattered their picture-perfect reception. The cake was never cut. I'm Felicity. I'm 32 years old now. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. You know, the kind of place with cobblestone streets, historic mansions with their wraparound porches, and the thick, sticky air that clings to your skin most of the year. My family wasn't quite old money, but we definitely wanted to look like it. My father, Arthur, was a respected lawyer, quiet, sharp, kind. My mother, Diane, was, let's say, different. She wanted more. She cared deeply about appearances, about climbing the social ladder, and about being the envy of her friends. Then there was my little sister Savannah, the golden child. She had always been the beautiful, bubbly one who made friends effortlessly, who dated all the right boys, who fit perfectly into my mother's image of what a daughter should be. I was the opposite, bookish, introverted, driven. I worked hard, earned a full-ride scholarship, and eventually became a lawyer myself, but not in the high society way my mother envisioned. I had my own tiny practice, helping regular people. And I was happy with that. For years, I thought my success might win my mother's approval. It never did. When I was 25, everything changed. My father passed away suddenly, stroke, out of nowhere. Losing him broke something inside me. He had always been my rock, my buffer from my mother's passive-aggressive jabs. After the funeral, we gathered for the reading of the will, and that's when the real cracks in my family began to show. To my shock, Dad had left me a sizable inheritance. A trust fund he had quietly built for me over the years. Savannah got something too, but it was smaller. He'd trusted my mother to continue to support her as she was still finding her footing. When the lawyer read out the amounts, my mother's face tightened in a way I'll never forget. The polite mask slipped for a moment. She didn't say anything at first, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. Not long after that, the phone call started. Felicity, my mother said one afternoon, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, Savannah's wedding is coming up. You know how important it is for her to have the day she deserves. This inheritance is a blessing for all of us. I calmly reminded her that Dad had left that money to me for my future, not to fund Savannah's wedding. I offered to help with small things, like contributing to the flowers or buying Savannah's wedding dress. I wasn't heartless, I just wasn't going to drain my inheritance for a party. But to my mother, this was a betrayal. Over the next several months, the requests became more desperate, then aggressive. She would guilt-trip me on every phone call. She showed up unannounced at my office, at my apartment, even sent Savannah to plead with me. Come on, Fel, Savannah said one evening over coffee. You don't even want to get married. I need this more than you do. That one stung. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. About how, even after all my hard work, I was still just a resource for them. I held my ground. Politely, firmly, always with a fake smile plastered on my face. The final straw came when I visited home one weekend to drop off some documents. I walked into my childhood bedroom, my safe space, and found it completely empty. The antique bed frame my father built with his own hands, gone. My bookshelves, stripped bare. My old upright piano that I spent years learning on, sold. I just stood there, staring at the hollow room. I heard my mother coming down the hall behind me. She didn't even try to look guilty. Oh, I forgot to mention, she said casually, as if she was talking about redecorating. We sold the furniture. Needed some extra funds for Savannah's reception. You understand, right? The way she said it, so dismissive, so entitled, it made my stomach churn. I didn't fight her. I just nodded, said I needed to leave early, and drove home in silence. At that point, I knew it wasn't about the wedding. It was about control. It always has been. The wedding day came quicker than I expected. They chose one of those historic plantation venues outside of town, white columns, grand ballrooms, enormous oak trees draped with Spanish moss. The kind of place my mother had always dreamed of, showcasing Savannah like a princess in a fairy tale. I almost didn't go. But I knew I had to. From the moment I arrived, I felt like an outsider. My mother barely acknowledged me. Savannah was too busy posing for photos and entertaining guests. The reception was extravagant: crystal chandeliers, live string quartet, open bar, designer everything. I wondered how much of it was funded by my father's memory, by the things they had sold behind my back. The tension built all evening. I tried to be polite, but my stomach was in knots. Then, during dinner, I excused myself to get some air. That's when I heard them. I was passing by one of the side rooms when I heard my mother's voice, clear as day, talking to a group of her friends and Savannah. She was never supposed to succeed anyway, my mother laughed. I always assumed Felicity would need us. She's so cold, so stubborn. At least we got what we needed from her in the end. Savannah chimed in, honestly, I'm surprised she even showed up. They all laughed. I felt my face flush with heat. My hand shook. I should have walked away. But something inside me snapped. Years of being belittled, minimized, used, it all boiled over in that moment. I stood there for a long minute, collecting myself. Then I calmly walked back to the reception hall. The towering 5-tier wedding cake stood proudly in the center of the ballroom, waiting for its grand moment. The DJ was about to announce the cake cutting. That's when I did it. I walked straight up to the microphone on the stage and tapped it gently. The room fell silent. Hi everyone, I began, smiling sweetly. Before we cut this beautiful cake, I'd like to say a few words. A murmur swept through the guests. My mother looked like she was about to faint. Savannah froze. I want to congratulate Savannah and her new husband. You both look stunning tonight. But I'd also like to take a moment to thank my mother. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Thank you, Mom, for teaching me a very important lesson, that no matter how hard I work, no matter what I achieve, I will always be seen as nothing more than a wallet to you. The whispers grew louder. My mother's friends looked around uncomfortably. You see, everyone, I continued, my voice perfectly calm, when I refused to hand over my inheritance to fund this event, my mother and sister decided to take something else instead. My childhood room. My memories. My father's legacy. I turned and locked eyes with my mother. She was pale, her mouth slightly open. I overheard you earlier, I said softly. And you're right, maybe I was never supposed to succeed. But I did. And after today, I'll finally be free of you. Without another word, I walked straight over to the towering cake. With one swift, deliberate push, I shoved the entire structure forward. The massive, ornate cake collapsed in slow motion, smashing into the floor with a wet, sticky splatter. Gasps and screams filled the room. Savannah let out a shriek. My mother stumbled backward, clutching her chest like some Southern belle in an old movie. And then I calmly walked out of the reception hall as people stared, whispered, and filmed the scene on their phones. I didn't stop walking until I reached my car. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The drive home that night was almost surreal. I don't even remember most of it. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, my heartbeat still racing. The image of the cake toppling, the gasps, my mother's frozen face, it all played over and over in my mind like a loop. I didn't feel guilty. I thought I would. But all I felt was a strange sense of relief. Like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. When I got back to my apartment, I turned off my phone immediately. I knew what was coming. The calls, the texts, the furious voicemails. I wasn't ready for them, not yet. I needed to sit with my own silence for a while. The next morning, I woke up to over 50 missed calls. Most were from my mother. A handful from Savannah. A few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably her friends, or maybe some distant relatives who felt the need to scold me. My email inbox was worse, nasty messages, accusations, guilt trips. A few were even backhanded apologies disguised as manipulations. I made coffee and let the phone buzz itself into exhaustion on the counter. I wasn't going to answer. Not yet. By noon, my best friend Cora showed up unannounced. She didn't say anything at first, just set down a bag of takeout on my kitchen island and gave me a long, tight hug. Everyone's talking about it, she said softly after we sat down. Videos are all over Facebook. People are actually, kind of impressed. I let out a dry laugh. Impressed, huh? Seriously. You finally stood up to her. They're calling it the Charleston cake collapse. I winced. Oh my God. You may have gone viral. We both laughed, but underneath it, I felt the dull ache of everything that had led up to that moment. The years of quiet resentment, of being the disappointment child, the one who was never enough unless I was useful to them. Cora stayed for hours, and for once, I let someone take care of me instead of being the one keeping everything together. She didn't try to talk me out of my feelings. She didn't lecture me about family or forgiveness. She just listened. And I didn't realize how badly I needed that. By the following week, things had shifted from anger to full-blown scandal. In a town like Charleston, where appearances were currency, what I did at that wedding was nuclear. My mother's carefully crafted image started to crack. The story spread quickly through her social circles, how she pressured me for money, how she sold my childhood belongings behind my back, how I exposed everything in front of 200 guests. Everyone had their own version, of course, but the core of it remained the same. Suddenly, some of her friends weren't returning her calls. The sympathy she expected wasn't coming. Her facade of control and grace was being questioned. I didn't speak to her. I didn't speak to Savannah. But they sure tried. Savannah sent long, emotionally manipulative texts. "You've humiliated me, Phil. You've ruined my wedding. You could have talked to me. We're sisters. This was supposed to be my day. Don't you care about your family?" My mother's messages were more aggressive. "How dare you embarrass me like that? Your father would be ashamed of you. After everything I've done for you. I will never forgive you for this." Every message tried to pull me back into the same old roles. The dutiful daughter. The sacrificial big sister. The one who absorbs the damage to keep the peace. But I was done playing those roles. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. See, what my mother didn't know was that I had already anticipated this escalation months ago. Right after she sold my things without my permission, I consulted a lawyer to review my trust fund and ensure everything was legally locked down. She would never be able to touch it. The selling of my childhood furniture? Technically theft. The piano alone had significant sentimental and financial value. My father had listed certain items in a side letter attached to the will, items intended to stay in my possession. At the time, I didn't want to press charges. I thought we could move forward somehow. But after the wedding? After hearing what she truly thought of me? My patience had reached its end. My lawyer sent a cease and desist letter demanding financial restitution for the unauthorized sale of my belongings. A formal complaint was filed with the estate attorney who handled my father's will. That's when things got uglier. About a month after the wedding, I got a visit from my uncle, my father's younger brother, Leonard. I hadn't seen him much since Dad passed. He lived a few hours away in Savannah, Georgia. Yes, ironic, I know. He sat in my living room with a heavy sigh. "Your mother called me." I rolled my eyes. "I'm sure she did. She's panicking, Felicity." The estate lawyer called her bluff. "She thought she could bully you into submission like always. But now she's backed into a corner." "She sold my things, Leonard," I said sharply. "Dad's things. She used me like a bank account. She humiliated me for years." He nodded. "I know. And I'm not here to defend her. But I thought you should know, she might try to make this worse." That caught my attention. "Worse how?" "She's floating the idea that you're unstable. That you acted out of some mental breakdown. She's hoping if she spreads that narrative enough, it'll justify what she did." I sat back, my stomach twisting. Of course. Classic Diane, if she couldn't control me directly, she'd control the way people saw me. She thinks if she can discredit me, she'll regain control, I said bitterly. Leonard nodded grimly. Exactly. I clenched my fists. Then she doesn't know me at all. I took a few days to think after Leonard's visit. I wasn't impulsive. I never had been. My mother counted on that, on me being the reasonable one, the quiet one who wouldn't cause trouble. But I was done playing that part. If she wanted a battle of appearances, I could play that game too. I met with my lawyer again. We prepared a detailed timeline of her actions, starting with the constant demands for my inheritance, the sale of my possessions, the public humiliation, and now the attempted character assassination. I also quietly contacted a journalist. There's a local independent paper in Charleston known for digging into these kinds of family scandals. The reporter, a woman named Mallory, was respectful and methodical. She didn't promise anything, but she listened closely to everything I said. I provided her with documents, texts, emails, legal filings, even my father's will. I didn't embellish. I didn't smear. I simply told the truth. Mallory took her time, but when the article finally published, it was devastating. The headline read, "Behind the Facade, the True Story of Charleston's Social Climber and Her Daughter's Revenge." The story blew up overnight. Suddenly, it wasn't just private gossip anymore, it was public. The version my mother tried to spin unraveled completely. People saw through the facade. Sponsors pulled out of her charity events. Social invitations dried up. Her precious image of grace and class cracked wide open. And I hadn't even filed the civil suit yet. The days following the article's release were almost surreal. I watched, from the safety of my apartment, as my mother's carefully built world slowly crumbled. Every time I passed a newsstand or scrolled through local media, there was another ripple effect. A major charity board she chaired issued a polite but very public statement that she was stepping down to focus on personal matters. Social club memberships, once handed to her on silver platters, were suddenly reviewing her status. Charleston's old money circles were polite about it, of course. That was the way here, smiles and cold distance. But beneath that was the real punishment, isolation. The very thing my mother feared most. Savannah, on the other hand, took a different approach. She showed up at my office one afternoon. I wasn't expecting her. She must have slipped past the receptionist when I was on a call. When I looked up from my desk, there she was, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing oversized sunglasses like she thought she was in a movie. "Are you happy now?" she said coldly. I didn't answer right away. I closed the file I was working on and sat back in my chair, studying her. "You came here to blame me?" I finally asked. "You humiliated us," she snapped. "You ruined Mom. She's a mess. She barely leaves the house anymore." I let out a bitter laugh. "She did that to herself, Savannah. You both did." Savannah shook her head, like she couldn't believe I wasn't seeing her side. "You didn't have to make it public. Family handles these things privately. You aired everything like some trashy reality show." I stood up now, my patience thin. "No, Savannah. Family manipulates and controls in private. That's how she's always worked. You only care because now the world sees it." For a moment, the mask slipped. A flash of anger crossed her face. But then she softened her voice, playing the role she'd perfected since childhood. "Fel, come on. You're my sister. We're supposed to have each other's backs. Don't let this destroy us." I almost laughed again. The irony of her saying that, after everything they'd done, everything they'd taken, was almost too absurd. I walked over to the door and held it open. "We were never on the same side, Savannah. You just assumed I'd keep sacrificing for you." She stood there a moment longer, eyes darting like she was deciding which angle to play next. But when she realized I wasn't budging, she finally stepped out. As the door clicked shut behind her, I felt oddly calm. But of course, my mother wasn't done. A week later, I received a letter from her attorney. She was filing a defamation claim against me, claiming the article had damaged her reputation and that I had maliciously supplied false information. I almost laughed when I read it. It was weak. Desperate. My lawyer called it a smoke and mirrors filing, an attempt to scare me, maybe to get a settlement or a public retraction. But the documents I had provided the journalist were all factual, well documented, and backed by legal records. Still, this was my mother's last move, intimidation through litigation. That's when I decided to escalate. My lawyer filed a counterclaim, not just for the theft of my belongings, but for emotional distress and intentional infliction of harm related to her manipulation over the years. We included copies of text messages, voicemails, financial records, even statements from people who had witnessed her pressuring me after my father's death. Leonard, bless him, agreed to give a statement too. He had seen enough. For the first time, the control was completely out of my mother's hands. And she knew it. The courtroom filings didn't stay private for long. Charleston isn't a big city, socially speaking. Whispers traveled fast. By this point, some of my mother's so-called friends started reaching out to me, mostly to distance themselves from her. One even left a voicemail, half guilty and half gossipy. "Felicity, I had no idea it was this bad, dear. Diane always made it sound like you were the difficult one. I suppose we all believed what was convenient. I didn't respond. I didn't need their pity. Where were they when I was being backed into a corner for years? Where were they when she was selling off my memories to fund Savannah's wedding? Now that her empire was collapsing, people wanted to rewrite their roles. I let them squirm. It was around this time that something unexpected happened, something I hadn't planned for. Strangers started reaching out. Emails. Private messages. Even handwritten letters. Other people, mostly women, but not only, who had endured similar manipulation from their own families. Some were from Charleston, but many were from far beyond. They told me their stories of mothers who used guilt like a weapon. Of sisters who were golden children. Of fathers who tried to protect them but died too soon. Some had fought back, others still struggled. Reading those stories was like looking into different versions of my own life. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. One message, in particular, stayed with me: "You're braver than I was, Felicity." I let them control me until I was in my 40s. You cut the strings. Whatever happens next, know that you've already won. I read that message over and over. I hadn't planned to become some symbol for people like me. I hadn't wanted to air my family's dysfunction publicly. But somehow, by standing up for myself, I'd inadvertently given permission for others to see their own stories differently. That meant more to me than any legal victory ever could. But my mother wasn't done yet. Not quite. I got a tip, an anonymous message, from someone I didn't know. It simply said, "Your mother's trying to access the trust again. Check the bank." At first, I thought it was paranoia. The trust was secured. Ironclad. But I called the bank anyway. And that's when I discovered the newest scheme. When the bank manager called me back that afternoon, I half expected him to say everything was fine. That I was just being paranoid after everything that had happened. Instead, his voice was tight, uncomfortable. "Ms. Everett, I'm glad you called," he began. "There's been activity on the trust account." My stomach sank. "What kind of activity?" "Your mother recently attempted to contact our fiduciary department. She submitted documents requesting a transfer of funds from your trust." I closed my eyes for a moment, gripping the phone tighter. "She doesn't have access to that trust." "Yes, we know," the manager said quickly. Fortunately, the documents she submitted were immediately flagged as irregular. They were not authorized. "She claimed to have power of attorney over you." I sat there, stunned. Power of attorney? I hadn't signed anything remotely like that. She was trying to forge her way into my account. Even after everything, the article, the lawsuits, the public fallout, she was still trying to take what didn't belong to her. She submitted forged paperwork? I asked. Yes. Our legal department is already involved. A small part of me almost admired her audacity. She was desperate enough to commit fraud. Again. Only this time, she'd gone too far. This wasn't just civil manipulation anymore. This was criminal. My lawyer moved quickly, filing a formal criminal complaint. We now had concrete proof of fraud, forgery, and attempted financial theft. And this time, even her remaining allies couldn't protect her. The state attorney's office opened an investigation. Subpoenas were issued. Her bank records, her emails, even the notary she tried to bribe to validate her forged papers, they all became part of the case. The investigation was quiet at first, but it didn't stay that way for long. Charleston society has always loved a scandal, and this one was better than anything they could invent at their dinner parties. Once word got out that Diane Everett, once the graceful social queen of Charleston, was under criminal investigation for attempting to steal from her own daughter's trust fund, the few friends she had left vanished like rats from a sinking ship. Savannah went silent too. I heard through mutual acquaintances that her husband was furious. He hadn't signed up for this level of disgrace. His family, wealthy and well-established, was mortified by the attention. Savannah's dream of being the social darling was burning around her. But the most satisfying part? The justice system moved exactly as it should. Slowly, carefully, but relentlessly. Months passed as the investigation continued. Every now and then, I'd hear small updates. Charges were being prepared. Evidence was airtight. And then, one morning, it finally happened. I got the call from my lawyer, they've indicted her. Multiple felony counts. She'll be arrested today. I didn't ask for the details. I didn't need to see her in handcuffs. I didn't need to gloat. The knowledge was enough. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on my balcony, and watched the Charleston skyline under a soft morning fog. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. The legal process dragged on, as these things do, but her public image was shattered beyond repair. There was no recovery from an indictment for financial fraud against her own daughter. Eventually, a plea deal was reached. She would avoid prison, barely, but would face years of supervised probation, mandatory financial restitution, and was banned from holding any fiduciary role of financial authority ever again. The restitution clause was my favorite part. She had to pay me back for every penny earned from selling my belongings, plus additional damages for emotional distress. It wasn't just about the money. It was about forcing her, publicly and legally, to acknowledge that she had wronged me. Savannah? She tried once more to call me after the sentencing. Left a voicemail, her voice cracking. Please, Fel, it didn't have to be like this. You've destroyed Mom. You've destroyed us. I deleted it without replying. No, they had destroyed themselves. In the months that followed, I moved on with my life. I expanded my law practice, focusing on estate litigation, helping others who had faced similar manipulation from their own families. Word got around, and I found more and more clients who, like me, had been victims of quiet, familial control. Oddly enough, my story had made me something of an unintentional advocate for people trying to escape toxic family dynamics. Every time I helped a client hold their manipulative relatives accountable, it felt like a small extension of my own victory. Then, almost a year to the day after the wedding, I received one final letter. Not from my mother, but from Leonard. It was short: Felicity, you may never get a true apology from her. But you did something far more powerful, you took away her power. I'm proud of you. Your father would be too. I sat with that letter for a long time, tears welling in my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because I had finally closed the chapter. No more manipulation. No more guilt. No more control. I didn't need revenge in the form of cruelty. My mother's real punishment was losing the thing she valued most: her reputation, her power, her ability to control. The cake at Savannah's wedding was never cut. But I had finally cut myself free.